Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the main stage of the 2020 Duke University Energy Conference, where we're about to kick off our closing keynote conversation. I'm honored to introduce Carmichael Roberts and Sidney McLaurin, two Duke alumni, as our closing keynote today. It wasn't too long ago that they were students like myself and my peers, and it's so inspiring to see how much of an impact they've made since their time here at Duke. They will be telling us their story of navigating the entrepreneur world and showing resilience in uncertain times. Carmichael holds his Bachelor of Science and PhD from Duke. He has since co-founded several ventures and currently is a founding partner of Material Impact, a fund that seeks out transformative technologies in material science that solves real-world problems. He also co-chairs the investment committee of Breakthrough Energy, a clean tech-focused investment group committed to changing the world by creating and building companies that address the threat of climate change and long-term sustainability for the planet. Alongside Carmichael is Sidney McLaurin, who received 2 master's degrees from Duke University. He is also a partner at Material Impact, where he focuses primarily on scaling technologies that increase efficiency while reducing demands on environmental resources. He most recently has been working on a new venture that offers data centers an alternative to traditional data storage methods that will significantly reduce energy usage for storage. This session will end at 3:45, so we'll have a 20-minute Q&A period with our audience at the end of that session. We will be able to gather your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A function. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you now, Carmichael.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Just to start off, you mentioned it's been only a few years removed from Duke. I will say for myself, that is the case. I don't know if we'd call it a few years for Carmichael necessarily, but I'm sure ambitiously he would agree with you.
Yeah. And I was going to say, Sidney, just to chime in here. So while we're doing this, my youngest daughter asked me, "Dad, remind me again, you do have a PhD." Oh, that must have taken you like 8 years. So yeah, it's been a while.
Fair enough. So first off, a couple of thank yous. So I just want to say thank you to Katie and the rest of the Duke Energy team. I know you all have been working really hard on this event. I attended when I was a student there, and I know it's a lot of work to put it together. So I definitely want to say thank you. And then second, I think to the people on our team, so Tara and Deanna did a great job in the background helping us put this together. So I just want to say thank you to them. We certainly couldn't have done this without you. And then the last thank you, it's Veterans Day. I just want to say thank you to all the veterans. I know their sacrifice is very much appreciated by all of us. And so just wanted to start off, at the top of the hour by saying thank you for that service. I think it gives me a lot of gratitude when I think about all the opportunities we have as a result of what you've done. And so just wanted to say thank you. So with that, we'll dive in. So first topic is around clean tech. So a bunch of folks on the call I know are probably familiar with the clean tech movement, and broadly, energy was a part of that clean tech movement. And thinking about that, that was about 10 or 15 years ago. A lot has changed since then. Bunch of funds are popping up on this sort of movement of clean tech 2.0. You are one of those. You are one of those funds. Tell us a little bit about what do you see as being different now, 10 or 15 years later, and tell us what you think the future looks like for energy investment and then clean tech more broadly.
Happy to do so. I mean, in all seriousness, you were talking about the years from graduation, and just saying what happened 10 or 15 years ago is a long time ago. So let me first say the one thing that hasn't changed. The thing that hasn't changed is the problem, right, that we're trying to address, and the fact that still one of the greatest existential threats to mankind and to our planet, we all know right now, is what's going on in the climate and underlying things around the cleanliness that we need to address. That's absolutely the same, sadly, 15 years later. But if we go back and ask what's changed, tremendous is the good news. A tremendous amount has changed. So if I reflect back to when clean tech first got started, it was almost like a new feeling of this shiny object of a thing that could be important, that sounds like it's important, feels like it's important, feels like a good thing to do. a nice thing to do. Those who are really close kind of could feel it's probably a necessary thing to do, but it wasn't as pervasive as right now. So when I think about what's going on right now, we even look at 2019, even before the pandemic, but even sitting in 2020, one of the things that's changed tremendously is that this is broadly a topic that's important to everyone. Even if you don't believe in, for whatever reason, the actual details and the science and the data behind climate, I mean, people generally, even those folks, believe that we need to do something to have a cleaner world and a better approach to certain things. So I'd say the movement that I've felt in that time period is fundamentally different. Let me be very specific. I get calls from entrepreneurs who've been successful in selling their companies or taking their companies public, or people who are right below those entrepreneurs in some of the biggest companies in the world, where they call me up saying, Carmichael, for the next thing I do, I want to do something that's more focused on making a difference around the climate issue, around the clean tech, if you will, issue. And I think that where you're talking about great entrepreneurs who came traditionally out of what would be harder technology type stuff to some entrepreneurs and operators and great business folks, women and men, who historically have been outside the scope of it, who are now moving over into it. So just the talent that's come into this area to try and solve the problem is tremendous. I think if you just take a look at, we can't help it now, but look at elections in just general, and I don't, let's put aside who cares about what, but look more just generally trends. Who's not talking about climate and clean as a part of their platform, one way or another, how they address it at all levels. I'm not just talking at the top level of election, in the highest position in the country, but at all levels now. It is a understandable topic. That's fundamentally different. That wasn't the case prior. But I'd say probably the most exciting thing are all the technology, solutions, creativity around policy that's starting to mount. I mean, this it feels very different. Because I remember when the first, as you said, 1.0 started. I was excited then, but this feels very different. This feels like something that's going to be around for another 10 to 20 years, not something that may have a 3-year shot. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned this focus on hard tech. One of the changes in the venture landscape we've seen recently is this sort of emergence of hard tech investment. How do you see that playing a role in this clean tech 2.0 movement and energy, more broadly? Do you see, many of the startups around that space? Do you see them as hard tech? And if so, why do you think that is?
Sidney, if you don't mind, I'm going to answer the question, but I want to take a step back by giving you my explanation of what hard tech is. Because as I think about it right now, and I spend a lot of time talking to, as you know, Sidney, firsthand, folks who are 10 years old, all the way to, people in my family who are 80 to 90 years old. And I would say at both extremes, if I say hard tech and tough tech, they don't know what I'm talking about per se. So let me make sure, and then everything in between, the definition can be slightly different. Let me do it by giving like a common sense example. If you're trying to figure out how to come up with something cool, like a new photo sharing app or a new chat site, or something that is more, less steeped in biology, less steeped in physics, less steeped in material science, less steeped in, the harder set of sciences. Those aren't called tough tech things. That could be very interesting things to work on, but they're not considered like deeply rooted in science type stuff. The harder tech stuff, which is also sometimes described as tough tech as well, is more of that fundamental stuff that sits around the deeper science related things. And so to Sidney, to your question around, as we think about. And hopefully this makes sense now. If you think about keeping the world healthy, fed, secure, powered, and of course, warm and clean, those kind of like real world problems, those basic kind of problems, if you look historically, the solutions have also often been around harder tech, tougher tech ideas, innovations. And that's not going to change. So when you look at things that we have to do in climate and some of the best companies and ideas that are coming about, not surprisingly, the lion's share of those are rooted in harder technologies. And I do want to say that doesn't mean you have to have a PhD like I do. In fact, some of the best entrepreneurs I've got that I'm involved with, don't have a science degree even in undergrad. And they're phenomenal still at figuring out how to take some of these ideas and bring them to a level where that's commercial by having other folks around them who address the science. At the same time, phenomenal entrepreneurs who have PhDs. So, I do want to say, once you hear me talk about this deep science stuff, I want to encourage everybody and anybody who's listening, regardless of what age you are, what background you may or may not have, there's a role for you to play to make a difference.
Yeah, and certainly as one of those people, I certainly have an engineering undergrad, right? But I don't have a PhD as well. And so running a very technical company with PhDs has been a really fun experience in terms of just, the learning, the science. And so I would advocate for anybody thinking about doing that. It's a great experience. So taking things down a level deeper into the entrepreneurship component of building these companies, I have had a really huge honor of being a partner at your fund and then being CEO of an early stage startup in which you're the chairman. And so it's given me the opportunity to see up close, how much time and attention you give to your companies. I mean, we've sat on the call, sat on calls and texts late at night just about one specific item, right? About, hey, this company's working on this, and we've spent an hour, just you sort of telling me your thoughts and me getting to ask questions and going back and forth. And I know that's something really, really crucial, to your sort of thesis of how you go about things at both breakthrough and material impact. Could you talk a little bit about why that's so important to you? You could also use your time on the later stage investments. You could also use your time on, making a set of broad bets. You could also use your time on a number of other strategies. Why do you employ the strategy you do, and how do you see that as important to the industry as a whole?
I think it's a great question, Sidney. And first, let me say thank you for saying that you think it's great, an honor, a privilege to kind of be in that situation as being the CEO of something that I'm involved with that intimately. You also know it's not easy to do what we're doing in that, right? I mean, it's some of the tough things that we try to solve. Let me answer the question by giving a specific example. It reminds me also of one of the times years ago I came to talk at Fuqua. And this is indicative. I'm often talking at various business schools, undergrads, and so forth. And invariably, I get the question from young folks saying, "Hey, I really want to start a company one day. Tell me, what is it? I could see myself doing it. It's something I dreamt of. How hard is it to start a company?" And I smile and I give the answer, the joking answer of, "Oh, that's easy." And everybody goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah, you just file a thing in Delaware and incorporate it. You start a company." And so, well, then they laugh and they say, "Well, what about being a CEO?" I said, "Just as easy. Just name yourself CEO the next day." And then we get serious about it. And we go deeper into what's behind their question, which is I kind of redirect and said, "Now ask me about building a company." Because building a company focused on trying to solve some of the world's hardest problems, that's not easy. Otherwise, it would have been done before. But absolutely, some people are made to do it. So don't be afraid of it. I sat on a lot of, panels, given that information or sitting in front of classrooms, mostly from the viewpoint of me as I was an entrepreneur. What was really fascinating is even as I became an investor, a venture capitalist, helping lots of entrepreneurs, I would give the same advice, not only to potential entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs, but to also investors. I would say the same thing. Like they would say, "How hard is it to invest in a company?" I say, "Not easy if you got some money, write a check," right? But again, how hard is it to take your investment and turn that company into the outcome that you originally anticipated, that you dreamt of, the outcome that's necessary to solve the problem at scale, whatever that problem may be. Oh, that's hard. Again, that's building. So notice that theme, regardless of whether it was Carmichael the entrepreneur, which I was for many years, still am, or Carmichael the venture capitalist, looking at, firms like when I was at Northbridge originally, or, Material Impact and Breakthrough, still the same thing around the same answer, which is writing a check is not hard. Actually helping the entrepreneurs, the operators, the CEOs navigate that company through choppy waters to a success, very difficult. And that's all about building, that word you used. So, Sidney, you talked about the time I put towards that. I probably these days get more people asking me about wanting to go into venture one day. And what does it take? And I tell them all the time, my answer is going to be more of you being a successful venture capitalist, not just becoming a venture capitalist, and also just being happy in life. And if you think about those two things, if something is going wrong in a company that you care a lot about, that you've invested in as a venture capitalist, you have no way of trying to give that company advice to navigate and build. I can't imagine what that feels like to be that lost. I remember for a little while I toiled around with building a house from scratch instead of buying one that was built. And I eventually, my wife talked some sense into me, by just kind of showing me over time that I'd be in trouble if I tried to build a house because I don't know what I'm doing. I'd lose sleep because I wouldn't know how to fix it.
Was that through builders or was that by hand, as you were thinking about?
Oh, I was talking about through builders. I wasn't even through builders, Sidney. I would be incompetent. So let me be clear. Even through builders, how do I instruct the builders? But you bring up a good point. Like the very best builders are probably ones who have built before by hand and later on can instruct your general contractors and help, right? So as quick as I realized how nervous I would be, how much sleep and how painful the process would be for me trying to construct a house from scratch versus buying one that was well built, I'm the opposite in the venture world. I ask myself, if someone makes an investment in something and when something goes wrong, it's just paralyzed because they have no idea how to help them fix it or how to build from there. I can't imagine that's a fun way to do your job. That's got to add a lot of pressure and stress on you. And so this concept of understanding how to build, and if you keep the house example in mind, that is a critical thing, regardless of whether you're instructing a contractor or you're trying to do it yourself. The same for a company. So here I sit today where I'm, one step removed from doing what you're doing, which is, running a company. But regardless, there's a peace of mind that I get when any one of my CEOs, and there are many of them, often give me that late night call or that text on the weekend at an odd time in the middle of a Duke football game or what I got something going on and I know I can feel it like, oh, this is a moment where they need to talk. And I'm excited to get on the call because I'm going to help them build. And I'm excited to get on the call because I believe in the advice that I can give beyond just here's some additional money. And that's an important piece for those who are more on the investment side. But please remember, that's also an important piece as you build your career as an entrepreneur. You're learning these skills, whether you succeed or fail in your venture. You're learning what it feels like to be in that seat and to have the reflexes to go left or go right. And later on, you can take that in a lot of different directions in your career.
Building on that a bit, you mentioned the CEOs and you mentioned the people who are the founders. What advice would you have for people who are thinking about the building phase, right? Who are getting past this phase of, hey, I want to start a company, who are now thinking of the skills they need to develop either through business school or through some work experience. What advice would you have for them as they think about building those skills to prepare them for building a company specifically in hard tech, energy, climate tech, specifically around this realm? What advice would you have for them?
Well, a couple of things. So I would say the first thing, I'm going to be super encouraging for people to follow their passion. So again, regardless of what your background is, if there's something about this idea of creating something and building it to solve a problem that motivates you, go for it. Then keep in mind that the CEO job is one of the most, if done right, is one of the most humbling jobs that you can ever have. And it's one of these things where there's 19 different things that you need to get done. And if you're lucky, you yourself are excellent at maybe 5 of them, right? And then there's all these other things that have to get done. And what you have to do is figure out how to get that help and the resources to actually get those things done. So the first bit of advice I would give is these are really difficult things to do. So pick something that you're super passionate about. Pick a problem that you're trying to solve that first and foremost is not obviously not focused on how much money can I make, but more how big of a difference and how I can make. And difference could be both in the quality of life for mankind, but also a difference economically in creating jobs, which relates to that. So I think it's the difference in whatever you want to define it, whatever you're passionate about. Get the arrow pointed in that vector, and then when you towards that vector, if you do that and you have the going in that direction in the right quadrant, then I would say begin to understand what it is that's required to be successful to build a business. And here comes the humility part. You got to have the confidence and the courage and almost the craziness to go after to do it. But then you got to take a couple of steps back and almost have almost a schizophrenic analysis of where you turn to another person and you get scared. Fear is good as the entrepreneur. I think Andy Grove wrote a book a long time ago saying only the paranoid survive. And what gets into that is thinking about, for those who don't know, Andy Grove was, the storied CEO of the basis of Intel. But it really gets into the psychology of beginning to be a critic and examining what's missing, and then go and figure out how to get extremely good at recruiting in those resources around you. I often get asked the question, Sidney, like, what do you look for in your CEOs and your entrepreneurs? And I kind of think about myself when I was the CEO and entrepreneur. And what I first do is I look at how thoughtful they are, being realistic about the things that they need to solve, and then how difficult it is to solve them and almost impossible by themselves. And then I listen to their creativity and how they collect the resources to solve them. And one of those things is recruiting. So I often people think recruiting is just, go in and figure out who's going to work for you if you're the boss, if you're the CEO. But recruiting is bigger than that. It's what large corporations are going to come around and help you. What are the investors that you get around you who are going to, help you during your darkest days? Recruiting could also be a key supplier that gives you an important ingredient that if they let you down could, ruin your business. Recruiting could be figuring out who within your federal government is going to be a great contact so you can understand how policy will have an impact on your business. So recruiting is your lawyer that is way more expert in legal affairs than you are, but represents you outwardly and is going to help make or break some of the deals and stuff you get. Your accountant to make sure you're thinking clearly about how we're best to position a business and where to sell through. All of that is recruiting. And those are the resources that I mean when you think about the 19 things that you need to be successful, and if you're lucky, the 3, 4, or 5 that you're particularly good at. So that tends to be. By the way, you can probably hear it in my voice. This is an exciting thing for me. I mean, I love seeing not only myself when I used to do this myself when I was a CEO. It's just remarkable seeing how people figure out what those 2 or 3 things are, and then learn how to navigate and get those other things put in place. And that's part of the building that I help out with. By the way, Sidney, I want to go back to another question that you asked originally. The thing that's different as well, and right now, and at this point, when we compare 15 years ago around things like clean tech and climate, you notice I named all those different disciplines and obviously different people, who's my lawyer? She's my lawyer. Who's my accountant? She's my accountant. Who's my supplier? He's my supplier. I talked about large companies. The other thing that's different right now that I'm seeing is this collaborative effort that is coming around climate. And it's really a special thing that I don't think the world knows as much about. I'm very fortunate that I could see it because I'm in a unique situation, particularly in the role on that investment committee at Breakthrough, where the largest companies in the world, some of whom people have on their short list as being the biggest contributors to the problem with climate, I can look in these folks' eyes and I can tell that many of them really care and are serious about making a difference and bringing their resources to bear. That is different today. I would tell you the collaborations that they want to set up are very different. I would say the other thing that's different is just the way the finance and investment community collaborates around a particular problem. So what do I mean by that? If you are an investor and you can own 25%, 30% of a company all by yourself, but you really understand that you need some help, you may choose to invest half as much and bring in a partner and decide to own 12.5% instead of 25%, because that's what's required to be successful. So at Breakthrough Energy in particular, they go after the way Breakthrough, the way we look at stuff and that realm is going after some of these big problems that require lots of capital and many of them and require a long time to build a company to scale. That may mean that you have 5 investors out of the gate around the table investing in one company and all cooperating to help that CEO and help her navigate through whatever she's developing. That is very different today. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that is different than in the past where one firm may have said, I think I got a tiger by the tail. I'm going to put in all the money here and then make a lot more. Now I see a lot more collaboration because that's what's necessary. And that comes back to that advice I've given you before, but you know it, but I've given more broadly to all those budding entrepreneurs. Just get the resources and then the environment these days is more fertile for that.
Yeah. So, if I summing up a lot of the stuff you're saying, I think what I hear is, resilience, I think being a key component in terms of both the topic on which people are working on, building, things in the world that help the world be more resistant, diversifying water supplies, diversifying the grid, et cetera, et cetera. And also just personal resilience, right? Of being resilient and thinking about what happens as you're trying to build these companies and think about them. Could you tell me a little bit about, how do you think about this concept of resilience within the current environment, right? There's obviously been a, incredibly tough and unpredictable time currently. How have you advised your CEOs? How have you advised your companies around this? And this is less about the resilient tech because, you're obviously invested in companies that are doing technologies that are helping the world become more resilient. But this is specifically toward the resilience of the entrepreneurs, right? How are you advising them and how are you helping them be more resilient to the changes in the industry? Right.
So that's a great question. So let me, like you said, Sidney, let's separate the resilient into 2 different things. There's the resilient in the sense that, someone's developing a product that goes out there and does something to make the world a better place and make it a bit more, resilient. And then there's the other kind of resilient, which is bad things happen, that you can't predict a lot of times. And how do you weather that storm in the midst of it? And if you will allow me to answer that question, both in terms of the human resiliency around when bad things happen, which 2020 is the epitome of that example, and I'll give one in a second, but also within the products when bad things happen. So let me just talk in a very common sense way on this piece. Isn't it amazing how every year we can almost like clockwork say, we're going to hear about fires. They get a lot worse. They get a lot scarier, but are we really that surprised about fires these days? It never gets old because we care so much and it kind of breaks your heart. But at this point, we don't look and go, we're shocked about a fire. Are we surprised about the hurricanes that come through? And then all of a sudden we read about some hospital, a lot of times it's maybe in the Caribbean or somewhere down in Louisiana that lost power or something. We it's horrible, but we're not surprised by that. It's almost like, we can kind of see predictably that something's going to happen like these kind of disasters. But yet we keep reading. Let's stick with that hospital example about the power went out in the hospital and then some folks died because the water supply and whatever. And you kind of say to yourself, wait a minute, now we know enough about that. So I want you to think about if you're designing a product, for example, it's going to make clean drinking water. That is resilient in itself, right? It's kind of helping with the overall resiliency of the planet to be able to have clean drinking water. But the other piece that has to be resilient is whatever the solution is has to withstand a hurricane. It can't be that you design something that you're surprised that the water doesn't not clean anymore because a hurricane came, right? So there's an element to the resiliency, not only in the outcome, but actually the existence of the product, that it has to be robust enough and it's designed that way. And I'll bring that up because it comes back to the 2020 as it relates to the pandemic. We're excited now about hope folks are genuinely excited about the fact that the large pharmaceutical companies, some of the bigger biotechs have made progress towards a vaccine. And you're going to hear more and more about the progress, and then we're going to wonder about the safety and how well it works. That's still in question. I understand that. But man, at least we made some progress towards things that look efficacious as a vaccine. Sidney, how would you feel if I know you care about your mom and your dad being protected from, the virus, as to, I care about my mother who actually lives in Durham. If someone told me we have a vaccine, but the thing only lasts for 30 days, and then it begins to kind of fade, we would kind of scratch our head and say that was a head fake, right? What is that? And so, of course, the pharmaceutical companies were way smarter than that. And they know not to design something like that. So that's not going to be in the messaging. But yet we think about products around climate and clean tech. Sometimes they get developed and they feel like that. All of a sudden they're there, but then they can get wiped out. So there's a resilience in trying to make sure the products are as close as can be virtually impervious to unpredictable yet predictable things that either happen from Mother Nature or sometimes man makes bad decisions like fighting in wars or policy and so forth that also risk those. So that's one part of resiliency that I did want to point out. The part that you asked about specifically is really what I wanted to pick as the second and most memorable part, which are the human beings that are behind these companies. And I want to get past just the CEOs and the entrepreneurs. It's everyone in those companies. They all have goals and jobs and a purpose and a reason that they decided to go after these really important problems and commit this chapter of their lives, whether it's someone who is 55 years old, who for the first time is making a move into a small company and wanting to build something, or whether it's someone who is a newly minted graduate who is 20, 21 years old, 22, this is their first job, and everything that's in between. All of those people, even if they're not the CEO in these companies, and then all of a sudden a pandemic comes. Unpredictable, right? Here we go. We have a macro thing. So now what happens to the human beings? Here's what's a really great thing. By and large, here's what I've seen in tens of companies, not just like 5 or 6, but when I say tens, I'm talking, I've probably been in a conversation with 60 or 70 companies easily in Q2 of this year where we were in the thick of it. The kinds of people who go after, have the courage and the conviction and the care to go after solving some of the world's most difficult problems are already kind of pre-wired somewhere in their conscious towards dealing with the scary. Because part of it is, these are really tough problems to solve, and they're trying to really go after something that they could fail. So they're already kind of, I think, self-selected in the companies that are around this climate and energy stuff. They tend to be more self-selected, to be more wired that way, a little more resilient themselves, because you got to be resilient to even go after these things. So what I've seen, which is just amazing to me, was I would love to tell you that they were petrified, knees knocking, paralyzed, and in comes Carmichael to save the day. That's not what happened. I would come into these things, and the kind of questions I would get, and this is across the board, was the first thing is people would state really fast. Number one priority to us are our people's safety and their families, without exception. I never heard anything different, and I heard it loud and clear. Then they would turn the page and say, we got that part. But the next thing is, last we checked, the clock hasn't stopped on climate change. So even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're out of time on climate change, right? We're running out of time. And so we don't know how long this thing is going to last. We can't sit still for 2 years. We got to get clever and keep ourselves safe, but make progress, if not make more progress. And I started hearing this, and I started to wonder, is this just my CEOs or my executive team? So of course I start talking to because I kind of pride myself on not just knowing the CEO, but I know the receptionist when he's sitting in the front of the company. So I may call up the receptionist who was obviously at home at that point in time, or I may be in a conversation with the head of engineering who is like a manager level, and she's running, this engineering thing. I heard it across the board from everyone. Safety first. Let's keep ourselves safe, the family safe, the community safe. But man, how do we have some ideas of how we can continue to make progress, because we can't simply shut down. And it was really amazing to see that from company to company to company. Now, here's where I was fortunate to make a difference. Those conversations that we're having going on within the companies, as I was hopping from company to company to company, I could start to see what was beginning to be best ideas and best practices. And I started to realize, I got to get these folks all talking to one another. And, sure, I'm going to hopefully come up with some ideas they haven't thought of and improve on ideas that they have. But by and large, they have momentum. They're not paralyzed right now. What they don't have is a community to kind of share these thoughts, because everyone's all of a sudden on Zoom, on Microsoft Teams, or whatever your platform is. So I began to try and myself share some of the lessons across with permission from different folks, but also try and create some forums where people were talking across the board. And the magic started happening, where you could see how people were coming up with, ideas and solutions to continue the progress. And these are global-based businesses. So this wasn't just a US-centric concept. How do we continue to work with the folks in Mumbai, the folks in Tokyo, the folks in Berlin, the folks in Shanghai? And it was really an interesting thing to see the creativity come about. And I don't think it was by accident. I think it was largely because of, like I said, the people who tend to be in these kinds of companies, they quietly rise to the occasion on this. This is sort of what they look to do. And as a result, I'm an optimist, but I'm also have realism in me. These companies are stronger. When you go through that is your vaccine, right? As a business, when the organism is challenged and it fights that challenge and learns how to fight through that challenge, it becomes vaccinated for the future things. And that is, if we go back to the earlier statement I mentioned about these companies, you can start, but how do you build? And when you hit those huge bumps, 2020 was one heck of a bump. 2021 is going to be bumpy. Right? It's not smoothing out all of a sudden. You begin to start to see, oh, wow, I could, weather that storm. And for those us folks with our roots at Duke, and you think about one of the things that if we go to, for the heck of it, let's go to Duke basketball for a second. That's that feeling that, again and again, when you realize when you're down, the game's not over. There's like 3 minutes left. And, you really believe, you don't turn your TV off. You believe like we can actually win. You know why? Because we won before with like 90 seconds left. And down my life. And that's what you start to see in these companies, just the muscle memory and the confidence that is like a vaccine. And I think 2020 is going to do that for lots of companies working on not just climate, but on world's important problems, including healthcare and some education and some other areas where I've seen some remarkable stuff. Got it.
That's super helpful. And so as we close out here, so we'll go into the quick fire section, and then it looks like we have a couple questions, but maybe 2 seconds on, you're obviously funding a lot of these companies. Where should these people start in terms of just thinking about, funding these ventures? Are there specific areas that might be better for venture, and again, just really quick of just thinking about where they might even start in terms of funding sources?
Yeah. The good news is there's a lot more funding sources for the topics that we've been covering broadly today. Whether you're in agriculture, food, building materials, transportation, energy, creation, storage. There's so many cool areas to work on, and there's lots of folks bringing money to bear. Their family offices investing a lot more. Some of the, I've been, to state the obvious for those who don't know who Breakthrough Energy is, I should say up front, it was started by Bill Gates, but it's 30-ish of the billionaires, wealthiest people in the world that you can look on the website and see that, Jeff Bezos and Jack Ma and Mukesh Ambani, and there's lots and lots of folks that could be listed. So this Breakthrough Energy has the wealthiest folks in the world. Along those come some major companies. If I think about what Amazon is doing now and the billions of dollars that they've committed to the space, and the conversations that I'm in with these large companies across the board is pretty remarkable. The venture capital firms I mentioned already in terms of the collaborations, individuals who in their own right are high net worth folks. They may not be the billionaires putting money in, foundations. There are lots and lots of sources. So depending on what you're doing initially, I would say you try to figure out what really is the amount of money that you need and the help and the resource that you need. And if it turns out that you need the kind of scale of money that requires venture capital, talk to venture capital. And I think from there, you'll also get some intros into family offices and so forth. Duke has, if I'm talking Duke specific, Duke has this angel network, that's been formalized, but you can, talk to individuals to that. And then there's, if you just need a lot less money, not millions of dollars, then it could be getting one or two folks who believe in you as angels. And I would say talk to your professors, not as necessarily as being the investor, but they maybe have the contacts to help that happen.
Cool. I appreciate that. I thought we'd be remiss if, as an investor, we didn't talk a little bit about how you actually finance these companies. So thank you for the advice. So moving into the quickfire section, I've got a couple questions for you, quite a few. So we're going to run them really quickly. So keep your answers short, and then we'll move into real questions. Should be fun.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
How many companies have you invested in your career?
Ooh, over 80, probably over 100 in terms of investing. Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Honest answer: Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Only it's the original one by Gene Wilder. Although I do like Johnny Depp. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Watch it every holiday. By the way,
it's definitely a classic. Over under 100 classes on Peloton?
Oh, easily over 100. Yeah, definitely over 100.
It's impressive. True or false? Tim Cook slips you the new version of the iPhone at the Duke Board Trustees meeting before they're released.
I wish. No, it's false. False.
How many companies have you been CEO of?
Oh, well, technically, if I start them, I have to kind of call myself CEO just to follow my own advice earlier. So I founded, co-founded, 16 to 17 companies, but real CEO position, 5,
Got it. Best place to eat on Duke's campus?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I don't sound too out of date. Current, I can pick several places in the Broadhead that I love eating there. Let me go old school on you a little bit. You used to have this place called the Oak Room that we used to, go to, when you're going to have a nice meal. But really, what I really loved is in my freshman dorm, we used to have a greasy spoon called Gradelli's. I used to love the hamburger with the onions.
There's all the food now on Duke's campus is delicious, so it's none of that anymore.
It's hard to think, right?
Yeah. What's something you can't do?
What can I do? Staying honest with it, my youngest daughter would say, admit that I can't play piano because I always wanted to, but I'm horrible.
Hopefully you don't spend too much time practicing that in the house during coronavirus.
She won't let me touch the piano. She won't let me touch it. So
window or aisle seat?
Window or aisle seat? Unquestionably aisle seat. We don't have enough time, but I had bad experiences with all the travel I have, occasionally getting trapped in that window seat. So aisle seat.
True or false? You were one of the last Duke male cheerleaders.
Now that was too much information. Yeah, there you have that. The answer is true. And if I'm being really honest about it, not only was I one of the last, I think technically I was the last. I think that was the reason that there are not any more Duke male cheerleaders.
True or false? You co-invested with Mark Cuban in a company from Shark Tank.
Technically true. Well, as a firm, we definitely did. Although, as you know, my partner Adam led that deal. But yes, we invested in Shark Tank. Mark Cuban.
Biggest strength?
Biggest strength. I would probably say. Well, not only people would probably say understanding people and caring to get to know them.
And how many boards are you on currently?
For profit, probably about 6 or 7 for profit, and then nonprofit. If you look at things like Duke and otherwise, probably another like 4. So 10 total, ish.
Yep. True, false. Former Duke basketball player, currently in the NBA, recently pitched you a company.
True. Actually, true. I was really proud of it because not just pitched a company, but did a heck of a job. It was like a good company, and it was impressive. And I won't say who, but I would say during the playoffs.
Yeah. I helped out with that. It was very, very impressive.
I was impressed, and I was proud of it.
Favorite time of year?
Favorite time of year, unquestionably, right now. The fall is my favorite season. I love the changes. I'm in Boston, so I love the changes in leaves in New England. I love the crispness. It kind of is nostalgic for me.
Should resiliency be a compulsory topic in business school?
Absolutely, I'm biased, but absolutely. You heard me talk at length about it. Yeah, I think it should be. So Fuqua, put it in there.
Number of Duke degrees you and your wife have together?
Oh, 4 degrees. She has 2 and I have 2. She's smarter than me. I'm on the record for saying that.
Name one thing you still have from your childhood.
I almost don't want to say this because this is recorded. My kids are going to ask to see it. But I have, I fashioned myself as a lyricist back in the day and thought I was going to be involved in either R&B or even hip hop. So what do I have tucked away? All sorts of stuff that I wrote that'll stay tucked away.
as it probably should. That's probably
they should. I'm pretty certain they're not as good as I like to believe they are. Yeah.
That's cool. So a couple more I'll pick off this list. True or false, your daughter's a freshman at Duke and specifically told you not to mention her today?
True. I'm resisting saying that her first name is Alex, but I just did. But yes, it's true.
True or false, you just started a Twitter account?
I did. I got a new Twitter account, and I think in talking to Tara today, she said I only have 70 people following me in short term. So,
what's the handle? Follow. What's your Twitter handle?
Oh, I'll send it out as Carmichael VC. Yep. Got
it. Favorite partner and material impact?
What kind of question is that with you sitting there? Okay, I got to qualify it. Today with you sitting across from me is you. Yesterday when I went on a walk with Corinna, it was Corinna. On the weekend when I was at Adam's house in the backyard with him at a socially distanced thing about 20 feet apart, Adam. So,
fair enough. Fair. Seems like a fair answer. And last question, best university?
Is that a trick question? Oh, here. That one is such a crazy one. I won't dignify that with just a verbal answer. I'll show you. Duke. I mean, I'm not... I got degrees from different places, and I loved other places, but I'm not confused.
Fair enough. Cool. So, Katie, I'll hop into the questions, and just to confirm, these are the 4 questions on the chat. So I'll hop into these now. What energy tech are you most excited right now that people aren't really talking about?
Ooh, what energy tech? The interesting thing is you put the caveat that people aren't really talking about as much. I have to ask myself whether people hear about this as much as I hear about it, but areas that have bubbled up quickly. Hydrogen is turning into a thing, and last year it wasn't a thing. I think it's a hot area. And depending on who you are, you either hear about it or you won't, but you'll hear about it a lot in the future, just like we hear about hybrid vehicles. In transportation, I think some really interesting things are going on, believe it or not, with beyond just the batteries for cars, but like with planes and other things. I think some crazy ideas that are worth like taking a look at there are cool. What are some other areas? This is energy indirectly. I would say, Eric Toon, who's a professor, retired professor emeritus from Duke, who's my partner in crime as on the investment committee at Breakthrough, always says if all the cows in the world were a country, you would be shocked at how that would be a top 3 emitter of greenhouse gases. So to solve that problem. I think coming up with clever ways to deal with animals and keep them healthy while at the same time decreasing the emissions, I think is a really cool thing. I'm starting to see some interesting thing there.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I got a lot of stuff sitting there. Yeah.
Energy investment space still lacks diversity in executive position. What needs to change to diversify the voices at the table?
Wow. Great question, especially with two African-American folks sitting across from each other in this dialogue, right? And in all seriousness, I'm serious about it. I think exactly what two things. I think more visibility on those who are in the industry, getting promoted in a way that people can see it, so people see role models. A lot of times people do what they believe they can do by seeing someone or that they can relate to. But if I go deeper on that, I think a lot of times, and this is not just with the energy sector, I think this is true across the board. When you want to get more diversity and divergent thinking, people say, I really want to do that, but I just don't see the numbers. I don't see the people there that I can pull from. That tends, if you think very carefully about it and look at the numbers, it tends not to be 100% the case, but there's some, but even if you roll with it and say, you got to admit there's not as many folks, well then stop saying it and start looking at the grassroots approach to increase the numbers. So what needs to happen? Lots of programs where you reach down and you encourage folks at the grassroots level, coming out of high school, going into college, or even earlier, to think about, believe in these areas, which I think energy and climate is one thing that younger folks are more attuned to than even the older folks who have become more woke.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think it makes perfect sense. And where do you see this? So let me preface this. Building off of that, environmental justice tends to be one of the big areas, right, that's related to obviously this, this diversity movement. Do you see this energy innovation and technology playing a role within environmental justice? Do you see it, impacting it at all, or do you see this potentially something that might happen in the future?
Oh no, I think it impacts it. I think it's interesting. I think if you look at where you see more opportunities. For whether you're talking ethnically, on race, or whether you're talking on gender, or we can cut it in a lot of other dimensions. When you look at the areas that tend to be the first movers to make a difference, it tends to be around things that are real, things that are opportunities where meritocracy can't be ignored in performance. So what does that mean? Think about athletics. It was almost crazy that you saw a lack of diversity once upon a time in athletics, when it's pretty easy to see that you got people of all shapes, sizes, colors, and genders who can be athletic. And so when you start to see that, so that's pretty obvious. But then if you move into something like energy related stuff, and think about all the components that go into making something not only successful, but get to scale and get globally deployed. You necessarily have to have divergent thinking and diversity in that to go global. And you also, and all the communication that comes, even if you're local, to prep for that. And so I think that you're going to see better outcomes. Again, back to the performance, the unambiguous performance. I think that will come in first and foremost in those areas and opportunities that are less subjective and more easy to measure the results in. And that's just history says that. So I think we sit in that area. The last part of what I would say to that question as well is there's another element besides just the performance in sports, where if you look to your left and your right, you can see the diversity across the board. Besides the performance, there's something about a common goal where you feel a real threat that gets people to drop, not all people, but many people to drop the bias that they may have, either conscious or subconscious, and focus on that goal. I was a I was a football player in high school, and I was part of a high school that just 6 or 7 years prior didn't have as many Black people there, and we were a very mixed high school. I remember whenever we were in the middle of a tough football game, no matter whether we were playing a team that happened to be all white or predominantly Black, you better believe that we as teammates didn't care about any of that. All we cared about is our teammates and trying to get to the other side. So when you think about something like climate and energy and environment, the more people believe that that's the kind of threat that's in front of us, the more the common goal will hopefully allow for less bias and more focus on, if this person can make a difference, then I want her, I want him as part of it. And I see that, and by the way, I see that in the companies, that, Sidney, the companies that we're all involved with, whether it's Material Impact or Breakthrough or many other firms, I see that.
Got it. No, and I think that's certainly a relevant topic in today's environment. So that's all the time we have. So this was fun. And I just want to say on behalf of Energy Week, on behalf of all the audience, thank you. So I'll turn it back over to Katie to close us out. But any last sort of closing things you might have, or words of wisdom for the audience before we close out?
Yeah, let me say, I want to have this one be more on Breakthrough for energy for a second here. So Breakthrough Energy has, I mentioned, some of the wealthiest, famous folks in the world have all come together. Bill Gates organized to try and go after climate through the lens of technology and innovation, and then he's layering on other things like policy and all sorts of collaboration. And one of the things that I really have a chance to do in this role, since Eric Toon and I are the principal decision makers on the investment committee for what that group does, is I get a chance to look all around the world, probably in a way that most people don't have a window into, largely because of those names and those large companies and what's afforded there. The thing that I would tell everyone is, over the next 10 to 20 years, there is such a tremendous opportunity that's out there globally, even more than one can imagine. So if you self-selected to be on part of the energy conference, and you're putting part of your life into this, I just want to say you're on the right track. It is, you should be pumped. If you look at some of the things that I've done career-wise, and I barely scratched the surface, I think the next 10 years are going to be awesome for what I'm in a position to do. What I'm going to tell you is, so many of you can blow away what I've been doing, because it's going to be tremendous opportunity, even at a much younger age, to contribute. So I just want you to stay encouraged and stick with however you're contributing, whether it's betting your or moving your career towards doing this 100% of your time, or doing something else and taking a fraction of your time to make a difference in things like energy and climate. Awesome.
Thanks, Carmichael. And I'll pass it over to you, Katie.
I can't thank you guys enough. That was such a wonderful session. So inspiring to kind of hear your story as an entrepreneur. So we really appreciate you guys joining us here today. And I speak for everyone that you're always welcome back at Duke, and we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Katie. Thanks to everyone.